If you drive around Wales, you'll see statues and these plaques, memorials to the people who died in the Welsh mining disasters. These memorials are a way to honor the people who died, trying to lift the economy out of poverty, to lift their friends and neighbors and family members up in the world. And that's why we need to remember them.
The U.S. government defines a mining disaster as one in which 5 or more people died. By this metric, there have been hundreds of coal mining disasters in the industry's history. Disasters continue to occur today in some parts of the world still reliant on coal. In the early days of the industry, it was the people of Wales who took on much of the burden of learning from mining disasters.
There's around 152 disasters in Wales over the last 150 years, from about 1856 right through to the 1990s.
In many of these Welsh mining towns, like Llangennith, the mine is the biggest employer and the central piece of the local industry. And so when you have a disaster, not only does it really upend the local economy, it kills neighbors and friends and family members and colleagues.
The worst disaster was in 1913, which was at the peak of what South Wales was exporting the same year. 439 people died in a single incident. I don't think anybody really knows, but they think it was a spark ignited from a stone. Our coal is very gassy. Each seam has got its own gas content built into the coal, so as you mine the coal, it releases the gas. And I mean, all you need then is a spark and bang.
Half the pit got wiped out. Not just from the initial explosion, but from the after damp, which is basically carbon monoxide. So the majority of the people were actually suffocated to death underground. Down to 12-year-old, that's the starting age, and up into their 60s. Still working underground. Still got that feeling that something awful happened to you.
The men who died, they must never be forgotten.
The valley wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the coal. That's the whole thing about the valley.
I mean, you know, it was a working pit by 1900, and it closed in 1928. Only 28 years, but it managed to kill 500 men while it was open.
William Harris was my grandfather. There he is after the explosion. My grandfather was the only survivor of the 1901 explosion.
And he only survived because he was a hostler, right, Jean?
Yeah.
And he happened to lean down by his horse, and the horse took the full blast. Not him. It's been very difficult because, see, not long after the disasters, we seem to be forgotten because the First World War started. Yeah. And of course, in the first day of the war, 5,000 men were killed on the Somme. So we just faded into insignificance. But, you know, not now, not now. We fight our way back now. The price that was paid for coal must always be remembered.
By 1961, we thought, okay, all this legislation's in place. But almost at the end of the industry, you had Tower Colliery explosion, you had Six Bells explosion, you had the Lewis Merthyr explosion, you had the Cambrian explosion, all still happening. Aberfan disaster was because the industry had never regarded tipping on a mountain as being a problem. When they produce coal, they've got to have somewhere to dump the rubbish. So a lot of the stuff is actually tipped on the mountain. Now, tip number 7 in Aberfan was one of a number of tips from Merthyr Vale Colliery. And for some reason, whoever formed it first put it on top of a stream. The tips were on the side of the valley. The colliery itself was in the bottom of the valley. Between the two, there was the village of Aberfan. October 1966, about 9:15 that morning, the tip blew out in the middle. Half of it just broke away and headed down into the valley.
Pantglas was the local primary school, and for generations every village family sent their children there. 3 classrooms disappeared, buried underneath 60,000 tons of slurry.
When I went back up the steps and looked, it was horrible. You knew that nobody could have come out from that bottom end.
Tipping had to change. A lot of tips were removed all over the country, you know, all over the world. The safety and the culture all improved because of all the disasters we had.
The coal industry, it's one of the first industries to develop a safety culture because of the amount of people who get killed for very simple reasons. Introduced PPE, and then of course it's adopted by other industries. If you go up the motorway, you think there were miners everywhere, weren't they? Because they all got orange overalls and white helmets. When the coal industry basically shut down in the late 1990s, it was the safest coal industry in the world.